Hello and welcome to this Managed Methods video. Today we're going to be running through a risk audit. A risk audit is designed to help take a look at your risk scans, make sure that they are performing correctly, giving you good, accurate information, and then if there's tweaks that need to be made, walking through how to create exclusions, which can help exclude certain things from risk scanning entirely, whether that be a user, a specific file, email message. Also looking at how to tune a risk, so if you need to make adjustments to the risk itself and change what it's going to be flagging, if there's issues with the keywords or the regex pattern, or if you need to make adjustments to even the machine learning models, we'll be discussing that as well today too. And then lastly, we'll be talking about content policies and how you can receive alert notifications and have the platform take automatic action if that makes sense, and even create additional policies if you decided to implement additional risk scans. Because certainly there's always additional things you can have the platform go out and look for if you need it to. So we'll go ahead and start here by clicking into View. And there's two ways to access the Risks tab. The first way is going to be by clicking into Discovered Risks here, or by coming up here to the right-hand side of the screen and clicking on the risks themselves. From there, you'll be presented with the Risks tab. To take a step back here and explain what a risk is. So a risk is anything where the platform's going out and taking a look at things for cause for concern within content. And that could be looking for things within Drive, OneDrive, Gmail, Outlook, Shared Drive, SharePoint and Teams, Google Classroom announcements even. If something in one of those items has been found to contain something that matches one of the risk scans that's turned on, it'll go ahead and flag it as such. And that can be anything from looking for social security numbers to credit card numbers to indications of self-harm, inappropriate images. There's a lot of different available risk scans, and there'll be 6 risk scans out of the box. And you'll see those over here in the enabled risks. So very first one of those is going to be PCI looking for credit card numbers. Next one will be PII looking for social security numbers. We also then have the self-harm machine learning model. So this is a machine learning model designed to look at the sentiment and context of documents, of emails, things of that nature there for potential indications of self-harm. Further down here, we'll have a self-harm strict model, which is going to be a phrase-based model, which is looking for specific phrases which might indicate self-harm. There's also then a toxicity risk machine learning model looking for inappropriate or violent language, adult language, things of that nature there. There's then also an image risk machine learning model, which is going out and looking at image files, looking for potential adult or violent image files there. When we come to the risks tab here to start off with, first off, you're always going to see this total active number of risks. That's just going to give you an idea of how many risks are within the environment here. And then there's 2 primary ways you can approach to take a look at risks. One of those is looking at the accounts with the most risk. This is going to be an indicator of which accounts have the most risks associated with it. And it doesn't just have to be internal accounts. If someone is sharing a lot of documents to your users or sending a lot of emails to your users, that account may end up here as one of the accounts with the most risk. For internal users, especially with staff accounts, it might be an issue with a staff member who's sharing or sending a lot of information that they shouldn't be. With student accounts, a lot of times can be an indication maybe there's some kind of issue going on or problem happening with self-harm or inappropriate images or something of that nature there. The other way to look at risks is by the enabled risks, and this is going to go ahead and order these risks by largest number of risks it's found to smallest number of risks it's found. And this is a really great way to organize and sort through the risks that way as well and take a look at things. And that's how we're going to be starting off today and looking at risks here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this number here next to PCI here, and we'll start looking at some different credit card risk scans. So here in the table below, you'll notice that suddenly now I'm just looking at PCI risk scan and not everything else. Just going to be now focused in on looking at this one risk scan type. And this is a really great way to go through risks because now you can focus your attention. No, everything in here should be related to credit card numbers. And if it's not related to credit card numbers, that means either you've got false positives or you have other information which just isn't being correctly flagged. And that's something to definitely note down as well there too. With that, you'll also notice that some of these various names here will have icons next to them. The envelope icon here is going to indicate that that particular risk is found within email. If there's nothing next to it, it's going to indicate that's found within files. If you see a paperclip icon in here, it's going to indicate it's found in the email attachment. And then for shared drive files, you'll see a double person icon there. If you want to take a look at a risk, how to do that is you'll want to go ahead and click in on that risk. And first thing you're going to see here is going to pull up some basic information about the risk. So sender details, recipient, subject line of the email, any attachments on the email, those will be downloadable too if it sees any, the domain of the particular risk, where it originated from, and then when this particular risk was picked up upon. From there, in the center, for any of the phrase-based or number string-based risks, you're going to see a preview of the risk as well too, so it'll give a snippet of what that thing is that got flagged here. So in this case, we can see it's a credit card number here that got flagged. And then if you need to get additional context on that, you have the ability to download the risk from the message body button here, or down under actions here with the download button. Either way works great to go ahead and pull that risk down, take a closer look at it directly from there. I'll go ahead and click off of this one and also click into a file because files will have slightly different information. So here on the file, you're going to see things like owner, if there's any user-to-user shares listed, who's holding the file and where, domain, when did the file get picked up on, when did it get created on, when did it get last modified, and then is the file being link shared to anybody? In this case, this file actually is being link shared. It's being link shared with anyone with edit access. So anyone with a link to this particular file would have edit access to it, even if they're not part of your domain directly. So definitely a good one to keep an eye out for as well, too, are those globe icons. Now, in any risks, you can also take notes on risks. So if this is an issue where it requires additional follow-up or additional investigation, you can come to the notes section here and you have the ability to create a note on a risk. And other users who also have access into the platform here and are assisting you with looking through risks and things like that will also have the ability to add their own notes. So you can have multiple notes on a particular risk in question. Adding a note will also apply an automatic label after the name of the risk, where it'll say risk note as well too. So helpful indicator that way to take a look at those risks a little bit further there and know which ones have notes associated with them. From there, after you've taken a look at the risk, made any determinations to figure out what's going on with it, you can come over to the actions button, and there are actions you can take against the risk as well. The very first one of those is called ignore, and ignore is your way of clearing things out of the environment here and saying, I've looked at this is good to go, I don't need to look at this any further. So if the incident's been handled or whatever's going on with the situation doesn't need to be looked at any further there, you're just going to go ahead and ignore that risk. It'll clear things out for you. Risks will stay in here for 90 days in total, so it's definitely advised to go through, and for older things that you've already handled or addressed, definitely feel free to ignore those risks. Below that is going to be a button that says quarantine. Now, right now we're looking at a file. So the quarantine action in the case of this file would actually go ahead and take an action to break the share permissions on the file and then also transfer ownership to the admin of the managed methods platform. So it isolates that file away, really does kind of pull the file away from the user. For emails, it's going to be a little bit different. It's just going to move it from the user's inbox to the trash. And for email, it's also important to know that the platform cannot quarantine or delete outbound mail traffic. So those quarantine or delete actions aren't going to do anything to outbound mail traffic. It's a limitation with the API both in Google and Microsoft, so there will not be a way to go ahead and stop outbound mail traffic. So do keep that in mind. Restore will undo any quarantine actions there, and then delete will actually delete the thing out of the domain entirely, and users won't have access to it anymore. It just kind of completely gets rid of that email. So great option if you need to go ahead and remove emails out of the domain entirely, or files, or whatever the case may be. Do keep in mind also that the platform will not delete anything from any backup solutions you're running. So if you're running a third-party backup solution, you're using Google Vault, any kind of other service there, the platform is not going to touch that information directly. Below that is share via email, which is going to go ahead and pass along the basic information to somebody else on this risk. So if this was maybe a colleague that you wanted to follow up with, or someone you say, hey, I need to reach out to this user, let them know, hey, I don't think you shared this correctly, you can certainly do that as well too. And that's certainly a great first step if you run across something that's cause for concern there, especially on more of the data loss prevention risk scans like PCI and PII. And you always have the option to mask the risk as well too, and in most circumstances that's recommended, especially for PI and PCI. Otherwise it'll send again that entire number string, which you most likely don't want to do there. Other important action here as well too, if you are ignoring anything, on anything that contains a number string, you do also have the ability, and this is going to be for PCI and PII, if you ignore, to actually ignore the specific number string for future risk scanning. So if you run across a false positive like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or something like that, you can certainly, and this would be for social security numbers, you could certainly mark that as something to be ignored for future risk scanning. Same could be with credit card numbers. If, for example, there's a repeating credit card number that clearly can't be an actual credit card, certainly you could put that in there as well too. After you've done that, you just go ahead and press confirm there. So then once you've handled an individual risk, you can certainly move on to the next one. You may have seen the next button in there. That'll pop you to the next risk in question. However, you can also take actions from this main screen. And it's advised as you're going through risks, keep a note of what's causing flags. If everything looks legitimate and yep, you're seeing lots of things that are a cause for concern you need to follow up with, that's great. The platform is doing what it should be doing, but you do want to keep an eye out and make sure you aren't seeing a lot of false positives or incorrect flags there that way. And if that's the case, then certainly that's where exclusions or risk tuning might make a lot of sense to help quiet things down and make sure the platform is doing a good job of giving you accurate information there. And that's always the goal with the risk scans, is to try to give you as much accurate information as possible. There's not a way to 100% eliminate false positives, but we certainly want to try to mitigate those as much as we can there. So once you've looked through several risk scans here, then from there you can make some determinations on things. You can say, hey, I've gone through all these risk scans. These are all good to go. I've handled them. I've addressed the issue with the users there. I'm going to go ahead and clear these out today. You can always bulk ignore things, and you can bulk ignore up to 500 risks at a time. You can also take the other actions as well, up to 500 at a time as well. Additionally, you'll see there's a couple other actions here that were not in that main actions button when you click into it, and you can take here just on the bulk actions ribbon. One of those is remind later, so you can create reminders for yourself or somebody else to come back and look at a risk scan. Certainly helpful if you're dividing the work between a couple different people. You can create one of those reminders and then apply it to multiple risk scans and say, hey, I want you to take a look at these 10 risk scans and see what's going on with them. There's also then a label button. This is a tagging system within the platform, so it'll apply a label right after the name of the risk. And there's 4 labels out of the box, with 3 of those being ones that are going to be more commonly used with normal, major, and critical, because the risk note one is actually automatically applied when you create a risk note. So if you're creating any risk notes there, that one's going to be automatically applied there. You don't need to worry about that. And the risk notes are a great way to keep a record of what's been going on with things. So if you do run across something where you say, hey, I need to look at that one further, I need to keep a note of what's been going on, you can always come in here, create that note. Multiple people can create notes on an individual risk as well too, and it'll apply that automatic label after the risk too. And you can also create your own labels. So really handy way if you need to do some further labeling of things or saying, hey, these things have been handled and are ready to be cleared out, or if, again, you have multiple people operating the platform, really handy way to let them know, hey, here's what things we've already dealt with here, or here's what things are really important that someone might need to take a look at it as well. Coming back to PCI here one final time, another way you can go through your risks and take a look at information is by using the filters. And the filters are really helpful for narrowing down what you're looking at here. So there's going to be both a quick filters button and a filters button. The quick filters button is going to help you establish some directionality around those risks very quickly. So this can be helpful. You say, hey, I want to focus in on stuff that's coming in from the outside initially, or maybe I'm most concerned about stuff that is leaving my domain here, or maybe I want to look at stuff that's just within my domain. So this is where you can establish some directionality in the risk scan and certainly narrow down what you're looking at. So it's a great option if you want to go ahead and focus your risk scans in that particular way. There's also then a filter button itself, and this will have some additional parameters. There's a lot of different parameters available here, but really you can get very granular with how you want to set things up. You can say, hey, I just want to look at drive files. I just want to look at email attachments or email message bodies. So there's a lot of ways where you can set those different filters up and really narrow down what you're looking at and make it easier for you to figure out, okay, here's what I want to start looking at initially, and then go from there. Now the machine learning risks are going to operate a little bit differently from what you saw here with PCI. So I'm going to hop down here to Self-Harm ML for just a moment. So with Self-Harm ML, this is a risk scan that's looking more at the sentiment and context of things. So it's not just looking for a single phrase or keyword, unlike the Self-Harm strict model. So you'll see things can also get double flagged here as well too, and in this case this one did. But you'll see always a risk level and a risk score, and this one will require you to do some more downloading of things. We'll come and take a look at image risk ML here in just a moment because I do want to explain some further details about that one. But if you run across anything on the ML side of things or any of the self-harm or toxicity risk machine learning models that are incorrectly being flagged, you'll want to use the false positive button here. So you can go ahead and give an optional description of why it was a false positive and then click apply. That will go ahead and automatically ignore the risk as well too. Submitting false positive, that information is made anonymous, it's randomized, and that's also then used to retrain the platform there moving forward. So really great option if you're wanting to help retrain the model and get those machine learning models better and better. And that's always something we're in the process of doing. So we certainly encourage you to report things back to us as false positives as you run across them as well too. For image risk ML, that one can be a little bit more complicated. So image risk ML looks for adult or violent images. Now the concern area would be more the adult images. Something that can happen is students can potentially upload images of themselves or other students or things like that, and they could add those to drive files or send those via an email attachment. And that's where things can get really serious very quickly. So you want to make sure you've got a really good policy in place of how you're going to handle potential adult images of students before you decide to download anything or click into anything. You want to make sure you've got a good policy in place on how those are supposed to be handled, what's the protocol on that before you take anything. So you want to make sure you discuss things with your administration, and if they don't have a good idea, then that's where you can certainly bring in things like resource officers or your local law enforcement and have a conversation. Because the last thing you want to do is have a situation where you're trying to do the right thing and it certainly can spiral and cause a lot of issues there. So you want to be very, very careful with anything that is flagged as a potential adult image there. So I don't recommend downloading things or previewing things or anything like that until you have a chance to go ahead and talk to administration there and figure out what the plan is going to be on how to handle those. So once you've had a chance to go through multiple risk scans and take a look at things and made some notes on things, one of the things you can always do too is always reach out to the support team or the customer success team, and we're always happy to walk you through your risks as well too, see where some problems may be, and help you walk through this audit as well. So don't feel like you have to do this audit all by yourself. The customer success team and support team are always happy to assist you as well there. So once you've gone through the risk scans on the enabled risks, you'll have a pretty good idea of where false positives might be ending up, or maybe some adjustments that need to be made to risks or things of that nature there. You can also then look at the accounts of the most risk. This is especially helpful if there's a specific external sender or something like that, or just an account in general that just keeps getting a lot of flags associated with it. So really another way to go through risks as well. And the same kind of workflow will apply where you're going through looking at the risks, but do keep in mind this is going to have multiple different types of risks potentially. So you can see here there's things getting flagged for PCI, for PII, another one of the custom risk scans as well too that can be potentially, other custom risk scans that can be potentially implemented as well too, though this is just an example risk scan here. But that's certainly something where to keep in mind as well too, where the risks may not be all the exact same type if you're going through accounts with the most risk there. So then once you've made your determination and figured out what's going on with your risks, your next step is that you could then look at creating exclusions and or risk tuning.